You can't get adverse possession of a house unless it goes for at least a couple of years with nobody filing an objection to it, right?
Right. Every state in the country has its own adverse possession law. And adverse possession, by the way, for people not familiar with the term, is when someone acquires possession of a property, starts using it, starts enjoying that property for a period of time, they eventually acquire the right to have a court essentially issue an order establishing that occupier is the new owner of the property. The schemes are different to a great extent. Most of the Northeast goes with a 20-year rule, varies wildly throughout the rest of the country. I will say California and Montana need to be really careful. It's 5 years there. Texas is effectively 10. So it's all over the place.
And if any time during that period, somebody comes along and says, no, I'm still using this property. This is still actively mine. I acknowledge it. It's mine. Then that resets the clock, right?
It does, but you have to have evidence of that. To some extent, adverse possession is a bit of a paper tiger. I know at least in Texas, I do see filings from time to time, but it's a very hard case to prosecute successfully. The rules on it and the evidence requirements are strictly enforced. It's a real challenge to succeed in an adverse possession claim. It does happen.
I've never run across one that was successful.
I haven't really researched this, but I suspect most of the time when you have a successful adverse possession claim, it's usually involving a small strip of a boundary of land. Maybe a fence was put up in the wrong place, that sort of thing.
Now, Flash, you recommend, or you tell me, if this gets into the court system, then they lose control. The owners lose control if it gets into the court system. You can't finesse the situation if it gets into the court system.
I mean, unfortunately, the way it is right now, homeowners are, the balance is so that the homeowners don't have a lot of rights. So they don't, they're fighting an uphill battle. It's presumed that they have the more money. They're paying for their attorneys. A lot of times squatters have attorneys that are, doing it for free, or they're doing it because they're trying to get a payoff for the homeowner. And I've said many times that squatters have the better attorneys. And what I mean by that is, if you were a pencil sharpener and that's all you did and all you had to do all day long every day was sharpen pencils, you would be the best pencil sharpener in the world because you only have one thing to do. The squatters' attorneys, the only thing that they focus on, they're not focusing on long-term. They're not focusing on taking your home. They are focusing on one thing, extension after extension until they exhaust the homeowner, till the homeowner can't fight anymore. And then they hit them with the payoff and the homeowners pay them. The squatter gets 20 grand and they move out and the attorney gets their money.
Is this the cash for keys sort of thing? I mean, is that what's happening? They wear them down and then finally say, give me some money and I'll leave?
I'm seeing it every day. I'm hearing about that stuff daily.
I have, on occasion, I'll have a potential client whom I've talked to, I've counseled about their situation, call me a few days later and say, I just gave them a couple $1,000 to go away. It does happen. By the time I pick it up, though, I can tell you, I never offer cash for keys. Well, I shouldn't say that. There were some very rare situations where the landlord I was representing was in a particularly bad spot legally, and it did make sense. But you're talking 1 in a 5, maybe 500 or so that'll happen.
Yeah. Well, we found several, and we documented it, and they've offered a lot of money on some of these that get into a newly built house or whatever. We've documented where they've actually sold the appliances on eBay. Like you say, Flash, when they knew they were going to have to leave, they sold the toilet, they sold the refrigerator, they sold the washer, the dryer, they sold everything they could sell, and then ripped copper pipes out of the walls and out from under the house and did $40,000 worth of damage to get $200 or $300 for copper tubing, which is just insane. I can't find a single situation where somebody has been prosecuted for it. In every situation we've documented, nobody actually wound up getting prosecuted for breaking and entering, vandalism, or whatever. They just disappear into the wind and they're gone.
Yeah, we had a this wasn't one that I handled, but there was fairly close to here, Flower Mound, Texas. There was a gentleman who occupied a property, and he was prosecuted, and that was extraordinary. My experience, I routinely tell my clients to go to law enforcement after the eviction's over. Go to law enforcement, discuss pressing charges against these occupants for what they did to your property, and it's always the same answer. It's a civil matter. They just won't touch these, and like we said earlier, it just isn't a civil matter. It's clearly a B&E. It's clearly a breaking and entering.
Yeah. How many of these have you done, Flash?
I've done, maybe in the last 6 months, I've kind of done physical. I've done about a dozen of them. I do consultations, 3 or 4 a day, across the U.S. and in other countries. In many cases, I can just kind of advise them and talk to them and help figure it out for themselves, and they don't actually have to bring our crew in. I've dealt with in the last year hundreds of cases.
Wow. How do you charge for this?
My heart was in it too much. So for like the first 8 months, I was covering everything, and it just didn't work out well for me.
I would think not.
I charge $150 for a consultation fee that I'm giving advice, and I put that money towards helping with squatter law change. And then, and it ranges between $1,000 and $20,000 basically for us to, I've got 3 different phases to where, basically it comes down to $5,000 a week. But most of the time for $1,000, I'll do a virtual thing to where I look these people up, I get their background, I check out their family, their minister, whatever, whoever, their sponsor, whatever it is, and threaten to expose them and send them a short video clip. And in many cases, people have social media and they care about their reputation, and I can get them to move out just merely the fact that, I'm going to expose them. And I tell people, if they want to help me get squatters out, they just have to subscribe to my YouTube channel, because, it's that influence a lot of times that helps me. And the fact that, I can pretty much have the news media out at a location by the next day.
Yeah. Wow. Hundreds of these things. Does that surprise you?
Not
Mark?
at all. Not at all. Now, Flash, I understand you're nationwide. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
My biggest supporters are law enforcement. And, so when I started recruiting, squatter hunters, it's amazing the amount of law enforcement guys that are either active or retired that reached out saying, hey, we love what you're doing and we want to help. And a lot of guys saying, look, they spent 30 years on the force having to walk away from homeowners and turn their back on them. And I'm giving them an opportunity to actually do something for a homeowner now. So, so I'm taking advantage of that. I'm bringing in anyone that wants to help. But, I'm just excited in the fact that I've got law enforcement, support, and I've had judges reach out to me. And now I'm actually have, which kind of surprised me, is that, attorneys are referring their clients when they get to the point where they just honestly look at them and say, look, this is going to drag out for like a year. So, and, they're like, you should go and try this guy out.